What is up, you guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing terrifying cases of encounters with real monsters in the closet. It seems as though it's been a fear to children around the world and everywhere since the dawn of time. The fear of something evil lurking in the closet or under the bed. Just going off of so many of the cases of the entities we've encountered right here on this channel in videos that I've discussed things and those entities with you, that this is a very real fear, and that's what we're going to be discussing in this video today. I always find it absolutely mind-boggling, okay, when I watch movies or even when I'm at a friend or family member's house and their child is being put to bed and inevitably comes out of the room either in tears or shaking with fear or fearing for their lives, and the parent in question goes into the room, usually amidst a great deal of frustration with the child, simply to take a quick look underneath the child's bed and into the closet as well in order to prove that there's nothing there. I caution my clients against this sort of behavior every single time. First of all, what's usually the case is what children can see when they're under the age of 6 and what their adult parents or older siblings can see are two very different things altogether. So it's no surprise when the parent or an older sibling or whoever goes into the room and they don't find any monster. This is normally when I get the phone call or text message at 2 in the morning from an exasperated parent whose child is terrified of their room and describing some sort of horrifying, grotesque, and oftentimes red-eyed and sharp-fanged entity which is tormenting them yet invisible to everyone and anyone else in the home. I am always so very relieved to get these calls because that means there's hope. There's hope, guys, at least for these children whose parents are fed up enough to reach out to me that they will end up being well-adjusted and not haunted children. Right? That means the parents are maybe starting to believe their kid and therefore they're making a call to me or someone else. So they won't end up haunted children, unlike me. Okay? That's why I feel so passionately about that. Sorry. So it may come a surprise to you guys because it definitely did come as a surprise to me that there are actually parents and adults out there who still behave this way. Despite all the things we've come across, discussed, and feared in this community and on this channel, there are still people out there, those that I call sleepers, who simply cannot, for whatever reason, accept the fact that their child may indeed have supernatural or paranormal gifts, which are presenting themselves at first with the sighting of something roaming the closets and walls in their home. That doesn't mean every child that sees a monster somewhere or a spirit or an entity or whatever, because it's not usually a monster. It's usually something that they're seeing as a monster. That doesn't mean that they're going to have abilities, but a lot of the time it does when it happens over and over again, especially when it's all different kinds of entities, right? When it's not the same creature every time. That's usually a sign of something else going on with the child. And please understand, guys, too, that that's not an indictment on these parents or these people at all, because I can try to put myself in their shoes and try to understand what it's like to not be able to see those things and probably be really scared and confused. I get frustrated when they get frustrated with the child. So I'm sorry. Again, I feel really strongly about this. So is it just me? I don't know. Let's take a look at what some of our victims had to say about their own monster in the closet encounters. Stories and encounters like this come from all walks of life and all over the world, just like pretty much any and all paranormal and otherworldly activity. The paranormal can never be accused of behaving in a discriminatory manner, and that's something we should always be keeping in mind when taking inventory when our children, or even when we believe we, are experiencing something like this. There are no rules, and there is no standard way of finding evidentiary proof. So each case is as peculiar and as one of a kind as they're all the same, right? Somewhat ordinary, at least for us. So let's start off with an account that I came across, and I just knew I had to include it here. If you all read my second book, the one I wrote with Steve Stockton, and then I put many of my real life experiences into, then you will remember the story I told of the evil troll or gnome thing that lived in my closet. I only saw it a few times, but I knew it was there all the time when I was in that house. It had yellow and jagged fangs that ran red with blood and an ear-to-ear grin/smile, which made me seriously consider peeing myself in the middle of the night rather than getting up to walk past that closet to go to the bathroom. I think I was about 9 at the time and living in a little apartment in a big pink house in Clifton, New Jersey, which is the town next to my beloved hometown, Patterson. So anyways, I know this fear and also this feeling of not being believed and having an angry parent, my dad, who is constantly frustrated with me for alerting him to the presence of entities, which are invisible, in my closet, mainly in the middle of the night. So, in this particular case, the victim feels as though they've come across some sort of fey creature, a troll, or a gnome as well. Since I like to refer to myself as the resident fairy expert here on YouTube, ha ha ha, due to the success of my book, Missing the Fae Theory, I figured what better way to start this one off than by bringing this encounter in to discuss with you all. This one happened in 1952 to a young boy named Dan Bortko. Dan lived in the United States, and more specifically in Wyandotte County in Kansas, and sorry, I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. When Dan's whole family moved to a new home in Liberty, Missouri, that's when the encounter started for him. The new home was a large 2-story right smack in the middle of an extremely remote and rural farm area. Though his exact age isn't revealed, it's said he was quote-unquote very young when he started catching glimpses of a quote gnome or imp type creature end quote peering around the property's red barn. Just a side note, I am always seeing encounters with fey creatures and a lot of other entities too near barns. I don't know the connection. So Dan claims that the entity was approximately 3 feet tall and a humanoid, and that it smokes a pipe and was in full German lederhosen attire. The entity wouldn't only appear in the barn though, as Dan claims that he used to see it lurking around the house and stalking the hallways inside the home at night. It even made several appearances in his room while he was asleep. He would always wake up though, something in the energy alerting him to its presence near his bedside and terrorizing the small child merely with its presence. Even if it wasn't malevolent or evil, that's still really scary, especially for a little kid. It's scary for an adult. So this creature always seemed to be like standing at the foot of his bed and waiting for him to wake up. When Dan would open his eyes and immediately go into full-fledged fear mode, unable to scream due to not sleep paralysis, but sheer panic and terror, it would then simply smile wide, think the grinning men we just discussed last week here on this channel or 2 weeks ago, and wink at him before scurrying off into the closet to disappear completely. Oftentimes, Dan would be afraid to go to sleep, and so once his parents would tuck him in and turn off the light, shutting his bedroom door as well, he would get up out of bed and look out of the window into the backyard where there was at least a little bit of light. There wasn't much light out there or in his room, but he claims that on more than one occasion, he spotted several creatures just like the one in his room congregating together in, near, or otherwise around the big red barn on the family's property. Dan decided to draw a picture of the one that came to visit him at night, and the outcome was so horrible and terrifying his little brother would go into fits of pure panic, crying in terror at the mere sight of it. Dan Bortko said of his very first time encountering the creature in his bedroom, quote, "I had just awakened from a nap and was rubbing my eyes and saw what you would call a troll. I call him a troll because that's what he reminded me of. It was an old man with a long beard, large nose, about 3 feet tall, standing at the foot of my bed. And I was astounded," end quote. So was this thing merely hiding in the closet, or could it have been in the barn and the closet simply a gateway portal? Like, could they have been interconnected somehow through a portal? The Fae are very tricky, and that they are sometimes able to create temporary portals, and I know and will say with absolute and 100% certainty that the magic, if you will, has to already be there in order for them to be capable of doing so. Whether or not you believe in this somewhat vague and seemingly benign, at least compared to most of the other encounters we come across on this channel and in real life, or not, you've got to admit it's pretty creepy either way, especially when considering he was like really little. Maybe that's because of all the terror and like crazy panic I was put into constantly from the creature in my closet peering around my bed when I was a little girl. Let me know in the comments below, please, what you think about this encounter and the ones to come, because we are far from done. Our next creature or entity defies not only all logic, but really any type of known classification as well. Our witness/victim reported what happened to her when she was young and innocently watching television in her living room one night. Her mother was watching TV with her, so when they both heard the girl's father screaming at the top of his lungs from elsewhere in the home, in the midst seemingly of some sort of severe terror and fear, they were worried. Our witness and her mother very quickly observed that the screams were coming from elsewhere in the home. They ran through the house and came to the girl's room and found her father screaming at the door, seemingly locked in from the inside. This was a mystery in and of itself, considering allegedly it was nothing but a plain doorknob. It didn't have any kind of lock on it, let alone one that would seem to somebody would lock from the inside, right? There was no lock at all, plain doorknob. This is another thing that happens more than I can tell you, the random locking of unlockable doors. Mother and daughter stood there in a complete panic, wrestling with the doorknob to try and get it open so they can get to the father and see what in the hell he was screaming about. Like, this was the father. Our witness said that at first she and her mother were actually a bit annoyed because the father was a heavy alcoholic and had had several breakdowns kind of like this in the past. He had been drinking that night, but allegedly not to excess. When they finally got the door to open, which took about 10 minutes, what they would find was so much more traumatizing than her father in the midst of an alcohol-induced frenzy. She states of what they came across that night, quote, "My mom struggled for a few minutes trying to open the door. Finally, she managed to open the door and we saw my father up in the air like if he was hanging from something. Then a few seconds later, he fell down. He was so scared and he sounded sober. He told us to get away from there and he ran just as far away from my room. And when we saw my dad, he seemed almost like pale looking. He had scratches on his chest as if he had gotten into a fight or something. My mom asked him, 'What happened to you? Are you okay?' The only thing that came out of my father's mouth was, 'The devil. The devil was trying to take me away with it.' At first, I thought my dad was only saying that to scare me, but he was serious about it, and he said that the devil wanted him and was trying to bite his neck. I thought to myself, it sounds more like a vampire than a devil to me. Why would the devil want to bite his neck anyways?" End quote. Somehow, the woman managed to get the father out of the room, and all three of them retreated back to the living room where they all slept together that night. The father explained the next day that he had been in his daughter's room and didn't really give a reason. So this is just a quick aside due to the lack of explanation here and based on what I know from my research and vast experience with such matters and situations. It's my opinion that the father was somehow or another lured into his daughter's room, and that's how he came to find himself in this terrifying situation, because there's such a vague, like, he was in her room. Well, what was he doing in her room? He couldn't explain it. So therefore, I believe that he heard something that lured him that maybe he doesn't remember, or unconsciously, subconsciously, superconsciously, he was pulled in. He explained that while in the room, he not only saw the closet door open all by itself, but that he also heard a man's voice coming from it. It's unknown what the male voice was saying because just as he started to register what he was seeing and hearing, he completely blacked out. In the midst of explaining and desperate for his family to believe him, though I'm not sure how they wouldn't due to what they themselves had witnessed happening to him the night before. But anyways, he took them back into the witness's room and to the closet specifically so they could all check it out for themselves and see if there were any clues as to what had happened and possibly how to get it out or get it to not ever happen again. Once they did this though, it seems they were just asking for trouble, as our witness says of what happened next, quote, "We all went to my room, then my dad opened my closet door, and we saw this figure of a man standing inside my closet as if it were asleep. Its arms were on its chest, and he was all black with long fingernails, and he had wings." The weird thing about all of this is that just a few days later, I saw it in my room. I was watching TV in the living room. We had the whole light on, so that way it could reflect light into my room, but that night the light only reflected halfway. I saw a dark shadow standing in the middle of my room. Then he took his hands out and started moving his index finger, asking me to come with him, with his reddish yellow eyes. I was so scared that I couldn't move at all. I was screaming for my parents, but they couldn't hear me at all. How could this be when they were about 10 feet away from me? Anyway, when I turned my head back to see him, he was already next to me. All he did to me was he lifted me up and he kissed my forehead and my neck. Then he left just like that. We never saw it again, but sometimes when I'm in the dark, I feel like someone is there with me, end quote. I always come from a place of belief when I hear even the most extraordinary, seemingly nonsensical encounters. This one kind of threw me for a loop because it did seem kind of vampiric, but it seemed very like movie theater vampiric with the thing sleeping. And what did they do when they first saw it? She goes from, we saw it standing there sleeping, standing upright, to a few days later, I saw it in my room. What, they just were like, "Oh, sorry to disturb you, sir," and close the door? I'm iffy on that one. Let me know what you guys think. Say you do believe it, or you're at least willing to consider that it could be true. What in God's name could this thing have possibly been? Was it a demon? Was it a vampire, a devil, or a fey creature? Could it have been something else altogether of which we haven't even a single idea or clue of yet? I feel as though, and this is the case with a lot of the encounters like this that I bring to you all here, which is why I bring them to you, that this is the beginning of someone in the home, usually the child, realizing abilities, whether they like it or not. I call it spontaneous activation, especially for a child whose one parent is already in addiction and the other, seemingly, allegedly, come for me, an enabler. It can't possibly be an overactive child's imagination or the hallucinations of a drunk because the entire family, all three of them, witnessed the exact same thing on at least 2 different occasions. Sometime in 2009 at around 3 o'clock in the morning, our next witness said he awoke at this time one night drenched in sweat and shaking with some sort of seemingly nonsensical fear that penetrated him to his very core and through his soul. He was a bit dazed from having just been sleeping and couldn't figure out, at least not right away, what was bringing about this strange, terrifying feeling all through his mind, body, soul, and spirit. Though his brother, whom he shared a room with, was still sleeping very soundly, our witness knew there was something lurking there in the room with them, and that it was the reason for the sweating and overwhelming sense of doom, dread, and fear. He couldn't see it at first, though, as it was pretty dark in the bedroom. He simply sensed or kind of just knew it was there, as I'm sure so many of you guys, so many of us can relate, right? There was an extreme heaviness in the air, and he somehow just knew and understood instinctually that what or whoever was there in the room with him and his brother, it was looming near the large walk-in closet. He said of what happened next, quote, "I looked around in my room hoping to see my mom watching over us from the doorway of the closet. I don't know why I thought it would be her, but I did. Since our nightlight was on, I could see things pretty clearly. I looked to my left to see a tall figure in our closet. It had an oval-like head with small eyes and appendages hanging from its face, almost like a scruffy beard, but it made more sense that it would be some type of structure. It looked over the both of us and looked us up and down. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, since I could be very imaginative, but what snapped me out of this is when it pushed some of the clothes hangers out of the way and the fact that the window was open. Its skin looked rough and pasty, almost like it was in a sauna for like 2 years. It caught a whiff of me being awake, and almost immediately I lost consciousness and control over my body. All accounts that were had from that night had not been fully remembered the following morning, besides the fact that my sheets were in my closet instead of on my bed." End quote. Once again, we are left hanging for more details and at a loss to correctly classify this creature or being, if we would be able to anyway. What do you all think? Let me know if you guys ever had any real encounters of your own with monsters, either under your bed, in your closets, in your bedrooms, anything like that. I'd really like to hear them and maybe do like a compilation video or something. Our next encounter happened back in 1980, and our witness/victim here is a young boy. This witness says he is now a paranormal investigator, and this was the initial event that would lead him down the path to this particular career and lifestyle. Because let's face it, it kind of is a lifestyle. This witness also shared a room with his brother and was lying in bed one night just trying to go to sleep while his brother slept soundly in the bed next to him. Just like our last encounter too, the event revolves around a rather large walk-in closet that was in the room. As he laid there waiting for sleep to come to his overtired body and mind, the closet door began to open of its own accord, and I'll let him explain what happened next. Quote, "One night I was trying to get to sleep. My brother was already asleep. The door opened, and I know this sounds crazy, but out came Big Bird of the children's show Sesame Street. I remember being frightened at first, but others came out too, and they were very friendly and led me into the closet with them. All I remember at this point is that Big Bird gave me a flavored chapstick, most likely to ease my fear. I loved chapstick. And they brought me back to my bed. I went to sleep very happy over the whole experience. It was not afraid anymore. I put the chapstick under my pillow after taking a tiny nibble, leaving my teeth marks just to see if it was still there in the morning. The next morning, I checked to see, and lo and behold, the chapstick was there, just like I remembered, and at that moment, I knew for a fact it was not a dream. If it weren't for that chapstick, the experience probably would not have stayed with me all of these years. I tried to tell my brother, but he laughed it off, as anyone would. It sounds totally crazy. Now, after reading the other accounts of similar experiences, I am wondering if it was an abduction disguised as a friendly interaction." End quote. This is incredibly common in abduction experiences, guys. Young children in their naive and innocent minds can't usually understand or begin to wrap their brains around the concept of aliens, let alone contact or abduction, and therefore they either imagine they are seeing a comforting presence before them instead of a terrifying and unknown alien being or life form, or, and it could honestly be either one of these or both, depending on the occasion and the extraterrestrial entity itself, the entity puts the image of a familiar and friendly face into the child's mind to keep him or her from screaming and crying out for help, thus turning their abduction plans into an ordeal where parents are now involved. I'm sure I don't know anything definitively and beyond question when it comes to these things, and I'm just speculating and going from my own experiences here and things I've been told by clients or other experiencers. I'm a bit confused as to why Big Bird, at first I was anyway, but then I was like, if you think back to how popular Sesame Street was back then, look how popular it still is all these years later, even with all of the politically correctness, right? I guess in some small way, it does make a bit of sense. Due to the fact he is allegedly now a paranormal investigator, this witness was able to take his encounter and look at it through the lens of an educated and informed adult, and has come to the conclusion that he was in fact abducted. This probably wasn't a one-shot deal either, as abductions never are, and usually anyways, even contact is a recurring thing when it comes to otherworldly beings. Aliens seem to not only be able to shapeshift, but change a human being's perception of them. At the risk of annoying some of you by inserting my own experiences once again into this script, it must be said that I see this with ghosts and spirits and even shadow entities and demons as well all the time. They present themselves to me as either much more threatening than they are, or as more non-threatening, or as non-threatening as they possibly can, all as a part of a grand ruse to confuse me. It hardly ever works anymore, but on an untrained and more innocent mind, it would work for sure, and easily at that. They take their abductee into account and find the least menacing visage in order to lure the person, not nearly always a child, and get them to easily comply. There's no other way, at least that I can see, and if I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments below, that we can explain the literal Big Bird from Sesame Street emerging from a child's closet, no matter how old he was at the time or where he was in the world. I guess it could have been a very real seeming dream or even a hallucination, but I would need more information to determine these things, and as I normally do, I choose to believe the innocence of this child witness rather than to break it all apart and try to find why it can't have happened. Plus, if I choose to believe the encounter and the person, then I have to choose to believe the chapstick too, right? So, guys, most of you know me by now and know that someone would be hard-pressed to find much that I don't at least initially believe in. It could be detrimental to call a witness or victim like this a liar, or even to suggest that they hallucinated the whole thing or dreamt it. I don't want to be responsible for those therapy bills. So our next encounter, despite involving a closet, leans more towards a traditional haunting, whatever that really means, right? Our witness lived with her grandmother somewhere in rural Pennsylvania, and when she finally moved out on her own, she started having vivid nightmares of what she describes as, quote, a spirit or demon, end quote, in the closet of the bedroom at her grandmother's house in her old room. She claims these dreams or nightmares or visions, whatever you want to call them, were brand new, and she had never in her whole life experienced anything like it before. Once she moved into her own place, though, they not only started on the very first night she slept there, but as the nights were on, the nightmares intensified and progressively got more and more terrifying as time went on. She finally had to move back into her grandmother's house for some unknown reason, and talks about when she did by stating, quote, we recently moved back in October. Now, I've always known that this house was haunted. Everyone has. I have had so many different experiences. For another story or time, I assure you, everything seemed fine and normal. The house is old. It creaks all night long. You hear someone calling your name. For me, it's Belle. Nothing unusual. As I walked past the room I used to sleep in, which is now my uncle's room, the other day, I instantly felt watched. Chills ran down my spine. I felt in so much danger. I quickly scurried down the stairs and forgot about it not too long after. I would walk by all the time. It's en route to my room. Every time I walk by, the door creaks open. Even if it's shut the whole way, it takes force to open that door. I was carrying my cat from my room to the living room with me one morning last week. As she walked past my uncle's room, a deep, low, frightening growl came from my cat. Then she hissed the meanest hiss as she kept her eyes locked on the room. The door was wide open, but nobody was inside. Recently, my mom has been feeling it too. The door opens slowly and she walks by and she feels cold eyes watching her, end quote. That's it. No, like literally, that's it. But our next encounter is a bit similar and comes from a witness who was living in Virginia in the United States at the time. This person believes there was a literal demon living in her closet in the master bedroom of her home. There would be strange things happening in, near, and around that particular closet, such as loud banging and unintelligible murmurs whispering in the night. The man thought perhaps putting a crucifix up on top of the closet would not only keep whatever this thing was at bay, but contained as well. He claimed the entity attacked his wife and knocked his young daughter over. He explains of the activity, quote, it did not take long to figure out that the presence was in a large closet area which adjoined the bathroom and faced directly towards the bed in the master bedroom. The closet area never got natural sunlight and was extremely dark at night. I could feel that something was watching. The crucifix seemed to keep it out of the room, but it still stared from the closet. So I did the usual, get out, this is my house, I command you to leave. I felt that this thing was not going anywhere and that it wasn't scared at all. It was not moving. Not long after that, we found a picture of our children on the floor and it had been smashed in the middle of the frame like something was thrown at it. One night while watching TV, my wife left for work and I saw a rather large shadow fly out of the bedroom and out towards the car as she was leaving, almost as if it was chasing her. Not long after that, she suffered a stroke in a major car accident, both of which left no lasting injuries, end quote. First of all, guys, I can't stress this enough. You never command an entity to do anything. Okay? Yes, you can command it to leave, but even if you don't do that in the exact right way, you could run into some issues. So don't go around commanding demons, devils, spirits, jinn, shadow. It doesn't matter. Like, don't command entities to do anything. You can try, like I said, to command them once to leave, but don't like command them to come forth or anything like that. Don't ever do that. Never, never, never. So guys, this is something else I see often, and it's 99.999% of the time taking place in homes where there are portals. Usually when dealing with a portal that's inside the home, as it's much more common for them to be outside and associated somehow with the land the home was built on, they will almost always be in the closet or in the basement or even the attic. Every so often I'll see one randomly in the middle of the room or in a corner somewhere, the occupants of the home seemingly completely unaware of its presence, despite being very aware of the entity or entities that come forth and go from it. This could either have been a demon or a spirit that was old or ancient and had a lot more power than your average malicious and mischievous entity coming from a closet or a portal. It strikes me that the crucifix at the very least seemed to keep it locked into the closet, and this is what makes me lean so much more towards it being some sort of minion from hell rather than an actual like devil or demon itself. So our last encounter with a monster in the closet took place somewhere in the southern United States in 2005. Our witness/victim was a single mother at the time and had just moved with her young son and niece into a duplex home. Their very first night there, they had an encounter with something paranormal and otherworldly that would terrify them for the rest of their lives. It started off as little things, the bedroom doors slowly opening and closing on their own, and the children alleging that something touched them. They claimed something was touching their legs while they slept and waking them up from it. Our witness explained, quote, "The second night of our stay, my son and I were lying down, shooting the breeze in my room. The bedroom door that was cracked halfway open had closed, then reopened. This happened a couple of times until we finally worked up the nerve to get up and turn on the light. The next night, my son blacked out after having what seemed to be a nervous breakdown about the ghost living in his room and his closet. Now, the thing about it is my son is a big 15-year-old and he does not scare easily. After 20 minutes, he went back to his normal self and cannot remember the incident. That same night, he went to sleep with me, and I woke up to something pulling back and forth on the doorknob of my closet. I screamed, but my son never woke up. Relatives have said that this place gives them bad vibes and that sometimes they can hear people talking. Now is day 28, and last night, my young nephew and I were sleeping when suddenly he woke up screaming. I had jumped off the bed, and the bedroom closet swung open right in front of him. But this morning, he can only remember standing in front of the open closet, hearing the high-pitched scream of a female. I talked to the people who lived in this duplex before me, and they also lived with the ghost. Even after saying prayers and using holy water, the ghost will not leave. I'm a single mother, and it took my savings to move into this place. Unfortunately, it seems we're stuck here for a long time, but this ghost is going to drive us insane," end quote. Couple of questions, okay? Couple of questions about the continuity. So one, she moved in with her son and niece, but had an experience with her nephew. So I thought that was kind of odd, but nephew could have been visiting, right? Or I don't know, could have just forgotten to mention him in the beginning. Why are you sitting in the dark, shooting the breeze with your son? I don't know, like it depends on the age of the kid, I guess, but if they're like shooting the breeze, I don't know. Okay, moving on. I know this resignation very well, unfortunately. The fact that, you know, you're just stuck in a place with these entities and spirits, and financially, most of the time is the reason you can't move. It's that sudden knowledge that you are completely and totally helpless to do anything about an entity that you have no idea what it is, where it comes from, what its intentions are, the extent of the damage it could do, etc., 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 ad nauseum. And you are left with nothing but these terrifying thoughts as to what is going to happen next. I was going to end with this encounter because this one is getting a bit long-winded, but in the beginning of the script, I talked about how this is happening everywhere and how the paranormal and otherworldly don't discriminate. Then I went and gave you all encounters from only the United States, despite the seemingly German gnome thing in the first story. So let's do one more and discuss the encounter that comes to us from a witness/victim in Newfoundland way back in the 1960s. It all started happening in a small apartment on Black Marsh Road. Our witness was either 9 or 10 at the time and still remembers every single detail so vividly, it's as if he is doomed to relive it all in his mind for the rest of his life. Our witness lived with his 3 sisters, his mom, and his grandmother at the time, and he even explained that the area the road was on, was well known in the community for being a haunted place full of ghostly phenomena and encounters. This witness is a bit different in that he never actually saw anything, but he simply heard it. That brings me back to imagining the terror even more, as it's all left up to his own imagination as to what he could have been hearing and dealing with all those years ago. Guys, let me know what you think is worse in the comments below, okay? Do you think that seeing the creature, beast, or entity that's harassing you and your kids, your family, etc. is better than not ever seeing what it is and being left to guess for the rest of your lives to figure it out, despite having to go through this absolute hell? Anyways, our witness said it all started with a coat closet in the living room of the apartment. Quote, sometimes due to limited space, I slept on the sofa in the living room. In the living room was a small stove and a coat closet. I remember the chimney ran next to the closet. I remember so vividly being woken up between 3 and 4 a.m. every morning to the sounds of a group of people conversing in the closet. To the best of my knowledge, there were 6 or 7 people. I could not pick out what they were saying, though at the moment I could hear them very clearly. This went on until we moved. I told my mother about this at the time it was happening, but of course it was dismissed as a child's imagination until many years later, end quote. There's a bit more to this, as he goes on to say he eventually moved out of that haunted apartment, as children so often do when they grow up. However, his grandmother was still claiming to hear the sounds in the night, also always coming from that seemingly benign and ordinary looking, at least during the day, coat closet. But Grandma here claims that she was able to permanently banish whatever it was by relentlessly reciting the Lord's Prayer until the activity stopped. Reminds me of how reciting the same prayer will almost always get rid of sleep paralysis and shadow beings as well. This detail stuck out to me just a little because of the crucifix that seemed to keep the thing away in the other encounter we just talked about. Is it a religious or a Jesus thing? Well, if you ask me, as a devout Christian and follower of Jesus, I would have to say yes. However, and I am not by any means trying to start some kind of religious debate here, as you guys should already know, some who don't believe at all or as much in Christianity or anything like it will say that it's perhaps the prayer and religious symbols make it so the victim or witness in question can focus energy directly on the entity in its domain. Or who knows? Doing something like this, focusing energy directly on the entity in its domain, like however you do it, a lot of people don't even realize that's what they're doing. It's something we could all do if only we knew how, or really rather if we only knew that we could, right? That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, enjoyed hanging out with me, and just want to see me smile. Spread the love by sharing this video. Subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the description box for some important links, okay? There will be a very short video that I've been putting out until I get my website up, which is coming, I know, about the metaphysical spiritual healing boxes, manifestation intention sprays, spell jars, crystal packets, friendship boxes, crystal oil rollers, all kinds of stuff, guys, that I have for sale, including personal intuitive oracle readings, video or remote. Email me at GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com if you'd like a personal intuitive oracle reading. Check us out here on Wednesday nights, myself and Ghost Dragon ZW, from 7:15 p.m. to 11:15 p.m. Eastern time, or until we run out of people to read for. Come on in, hang out with us. 1 card, random oracle card from a random oracle deck, and I will intuitively read for you for that week. It's free or donation, whichever. Ways to donate to the channel: PayPal, Patreon, Cash App, all in the description box, plus my Amazon wish list gift link. If you would like a copy of one of my books, either Missing the Faith Theory, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Tales, or both of those, you'll find the links for the paperback and Kindle version on Amazon in the description box. Or if you'd like a signed copy, please email me before you make the purchase. All right, guys, lots of fun and really awesome stuff coming up, trying to get this business launched, but many of you know what I'm selling, so hit me up, okay? I love you guys so much. I appreciate all of you so much, more than I can ever express. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you, because you're amazing, you're incredible, you're deserving, you're worth it, okay? You're put here with and for a purpose, and I believe in you. Smile at a stranger, always go in grace, and I'll see you guys next time.